At my son's engagement party, my future daughter-in-law turned toward me, smiling for the photographer, and then slapped me across the face. Right in front of 287 guests, the room froze. A champagne flute slipped from someone's hand, and then her voice cut through the silence. "Know your place, old woman, you're already ruining my pictures." My cheek burned, but the laughter that followed, that humiliation that broke something inside me. She just flicked her hair, smirked, and posed again like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my son, God, the way he stared at her. His face fell in a way I'll never forget, but what she didn't know was simple. She had picked the worst possible woman to humiliate. Before we go any further, let me introduce myself. I'm Marianne, 62, a woman who raised her son alone and someone who has learned over a lifetime that disrespect always has a price. If you're new here, tell me where you're watching from, and make sure you like and subscribe because this story, you'll want to hear every second of it. Now, let's go back, not to the slap, not yet. Let's go a few months earlier, to the first moment I realized something was very, very wrong with the woman my son planned to marry. Because that slap, that humiliation, it didn't come out of nowhere. There were warning signs, subtle ones, sharp ones, moments where I thought, something about this girl doesn't fit, something feels dangerous. And every time I brushed it off, every time I chose peace over suspicion. Every time I told myself, maybe I'm overthinking, maybe she's just nervous, maybe love will soften her. But I was wrong. And months before that slap ever landed, before 287 guests watched her humiliate me, before my son's face cracked with disbelief, there was one conversation, one moment that should have told me exactly who she was. A moment that now keeps replaying in my mind like a warning I ignored. And that moment, it was the beginning of the end. You won't believe what she did next. 3 weeks before the slap that would change everything, I walked into my son Ethan's home carrying a box of engagement party decorations I'd spent nights putting together. I was excited, nervous, trying my best to make things perfect for him. Lila, my future daughter-in-law, greeted me with a smile so sweet it almost stung. "Marianne, you're early," she said, as if arriving early to help was somehow a problem. I laughed softly, hoping to keep things warm. I thought I'd get a head start. Big events take big prep, right? She didn't answer. She only sighed, glanced at the box in my hands, and said, "Just don't touch anything that's already organized. Your taste is a little old-fashioned, and I don't want Ethan feeling embarrassed." The words hit harder than she intended, or maybe exactly as she intended, but I smiled. Because mothers do that, we swallow things, we pretend not to feel the sting. We choose peace over pride. Still, something in her tone that day felt different, colder, sharpened, like she wasn't just annoyed, she was measuring me, testing how far she could push. Ethan walked in moments later, kissed my cheek, and thanked me for helping. His warmth softened everything inside me, but Lila watched us with a look I didn't understand yet, possessive, territorial, almost threatened, and that was the first moment I felt the shift. The first moment I wondered whether her smile, the one she showed the world, was only a costume she slipped on when it suited her. The second moment came a few days later. I'd stopped by again, this time with a small gift, a bracelet from my own mother, something I'd hoped Lila might wear on the engagement night, a symbolic passing of love from one generation to another. But when I offered it, she didn't even touch the box. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, forcing a smile, "but I'm going for a luxury aesthetic. Heirlooms don't really match my vision. My vision, not our vision, not their celebration." Her vision, I left that day with the bracelet still in my purse and a weight in my chest that wouldn't lift. But through it all, I stayed kind, supportive, hopeful, because Ethan was happy, and that was always enough for me. Or at least it had been. Until the night everything changed. The night 287 guests watched my future daughter-in-law lift her hand and humiliate me in front of everyone. And still, she had no idea what she'd set in motion. Not yet. The tension grew slowly, quietly, like a thread tightening each day. And the closer the engagement party came, the more obvious it became that Lila didn't just dislike me, she resented my very existence. It became clear during the guest list incident. One afternoon, Ethan called me, sounding embarrassed. "Mom, about the seating arrangement, Lila thinks it might be better if you sit with the older relatives instead of near us on stage. She says the photos will feel more balanced." Balanced, such a small word, but such a sharp wound. I forced a laugh. "Oh, sweetheart, it's your night. You two arrange things however you like." But after we ended the call, I sat there in my kitchen, my hands trembling on the counter, wondering when celebrating my own son had turned into something I was expected to do quietly from the shadows. Still, I kept going. I bought my dress. I wrapped their gifts. I rehearsed my little speech, just 8 lines long, nothing dramatic, just a mother's blessing. but every time I saw Lila, she seemed to find a new way to chip at me. A smirk when I mispronounced the name of one of her designer brands, a sigh when I asked if she needed help, a whisper to one of her bridesmaids while looking me up and down. It wasn't loud disrespect, it was soft, strategic. Like she was building a story about me long before the engagement night, and Ethan, he didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to notice. One evening, I found him alone in the backyard, pacing with stress lines on his forehead. Ethan, honey, what's wrong? He hesitated. Mom, I love her, I really do, but she's intense, she wants everything perfect, and I don't want you two to clash. I stepped closer and held his hand. We won't clash, I promised gently. Because you're the only reason I'm here, I'll do whatever it takes to keep peace for you. He looked relieved, and that relief broke my heart more than anything Lila had done. Because my son shouldn't have needed to negotiate peace between two women who loved him. At least one of us did, but the worst sign came the day before the party. I walked into the venue for the final walkthrough, and Lila's mother, a woman I'd never had issues with, stiffened the second she saw me. Oh, Marianne, Lila said you might show up. She told me to remind you not to wander too close to the stage tomorrow. The photographer said bright colors can be distracting. I looked down at my soft ivory dress. Not bright, not bold, just me. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong, and all of it, every cold look, every whispered remark, every boundary pushed, led directly to that moment the next night. The flash of cameras, the hush of the crowd, the sting across my cheek. The humiliation I never saw coming. But the universe has a strange way of balancing things, because while she thought she was tearing me down, she was unknowingly stepping closer and closer to the one consequence that would turn her world upside down by morning. The morning of the engagement party, I woke with a heaviness in my chest I couldn't name. Not fear, not anger, just a quiet ache, the kind that whispers, something is coming. But I pushed it aside. Today was supposed to be a celebration. My son's happiness mattered more than anything else in the world. I took extra care getting ready, soft makeup, simple jewelry, a dress Ethan once said made me look peaceful. I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to myself, just smile, Marianne, stay graceful, do it for him. But even before I reached the venue, cracks were already showing. I stepped out of my car, smoothing my skirt, when I overheard two young women, Lila's friends, near the entrance. Is that her? One whispered. The mom? Yeah, Lila said to keep her away from the front, something about aesthetic disruption. Their giggles felt like tiny blades. I swallowed hard and walked inside. The ballroom was breathtaking, warm lights, tall floral arrangements, musicians rehearsing, everything elegant and polished, and in the middle of it all stood Lila. Laughing, dazzling, perfectly composed, she saw me. Her smile tightened. Marianne, you made it, the tone, as if my presence required explanation. Of course, I said softly, I wouldn't miss this. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Please remember, photos are extremely curated tonight. So when the photographer starts directing people, just follow instructions, okay? We want everything to look aesthetically elevated. There it was again, that word she loved, elevated, as if I were something dragging the night down. Still, I nodded, I'll stay wherever you need me. But something flickered in her eyes, a mixture of victory and impatience, and she turned away before I finished speaking. Moments later, the guests started arriving. Champagne trays glided by, laughter filled the room, cameras flashed, and I stayed at the edge, quietly admiring the scene, hoping no one would notice the storm building inside me. Then Ethan appeared. He looked handsome, nervous, and overwhelmed. Mom, he breathed, wrapping me in a hug, you look beautiful. For a moment, everything felt right, the world softened, my heart steadied. But when he pulled away, I saw his eyes shift toward Lila, and the tension returned. Mom, just enjoy tonight, okay? And don't let anything she says get to you. Please, that last word, a plea, not a request, told me everything. He wasn't celebrating, he was managing, and that broke me more than anything else. Still, I promised him with a shaky smile, I won't ruin your night, sweetheart. Not for anything, I kept my word. I stayed silent, steady, invisible. But what none of them knew, not Lila, not her parents, not any of the guests, was that I wasn't the one who needed managing. Something else was already in motion, something Lila couldn't control, something she wouldn't see coming until morning when her carefully built world would start to tremble, and she would finally understand that every action has a cost. The engagement party had officially begun, and I could feel the shift in the room, that slow tightening in the air when people start watching each other instead of the decorations. I stayed near the back, hands folded, smiling politely at guests who passed me without really seeing me. But then the photographer raised his voice. All right, everyone, let's get family to the front. Family, the word should have felt warm. Instead, Lila turned toward me with an expression that made my heart sink. Her smile flicked on like a switch, all teeth, no warmth, and she motioned me forward as though summoning a housekeeper. Marianne, come stand, maybe somewhere in the second row. Behind us, yes, behind like a prop, a placeholder, a shadow, but I swallowed my hurt and walked slowly toward the group. Ethan reached for me instinctively. I saw it, the small gesture of love, but before his hand could touch mine, Lila stepped between us. She slid her arm around his waist and whispered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Baby angles matter, let's keep the front clean. The front clean, something inside me cracked just a little. I stepped back, but not far enough, apparently, because as the photographer lifted his camera, a soft murmur of disapproval came from Lila. She looked straight at me, her smile vanished. Marianne, can you not lean forward like that? You're throwing off the symmetry. A couple of her friends giggled. Another whispered, oh my God, she really doesn't get it. My cheeks flushed. My throat tightened, but I forced a nod. Of course, I'll adjust. I tried shifting again, but Lila exhaled dramatically. No, just step out for this one. We need one nice family photo. That word nice hit harder than she intended. It wasn't a request, it was a dismissal. And there, in the middle of the ballroom, people turning their heads, eyes narrowing, whispers starting, I realized she wanted me embarrassed. She wanted me small, so I stepped aside, quietly, carefully, pretending it didn't feel like being erased in front of nearly 300 people. The camera clicked, guests clapped. Lila beamed like a queen. And I stood just outside the frame, the mother who raised the groom completely removed from his perfect photo. But as I watched her bask in the applause of her curated world, something unexpected happened. Ethan looked at the photo, then at me, then back at her, and something shifted in his expression, confusion, discomfort, and something darker. A crack, a tiny one, but real, and it was only the beginning, because that humiliating picture, the one she proudly displayed minutes later, it would become the first thread to unravel everything she thought she controlled. Morning was closer than she realized, and her $3 million dream was already starting to tremble. Just not for the reasons she assumed. When I woke up the next morning, my hands were still trembling, not from fear, not from the slap, but from the memory of the look on Lily's face when she realized Matthew wasn't blindly defending her anymore. And yet she still had no idea what sunrise that morning was about to take from her. I sat at my kitchen table, wrapping my fingers around a warm mug of tea, trying to calm my heartbeat, trying to steady my breath. Because today I wasn't the useless old woman she slapped. I wasn't the punchline to her ego. I wasn't the inconvenience she tried to humiliate. Today I was simply prepared. A soft knock at my door made me flinch. It was Matthew. His eyes were red, his collar wrinkled, like he hadn't slept a single minute. Mom, can we talk? I nodded and let him in. He moved slowly, like every step hurt. He sat down, buried his hands in his hair, and whispered, I don't know who she is anymore. My heart cracked, because that's the sentence no mother ever wants to hear from her child. He wasn't angry now. He wasn't confused. He was broken. Mom, did she hit you hard? I mean, does it hurt? I placed his hand gently over my cheek. It stung, I said softly, but you stepping between us, that hurt more. He looked away immediately, shame pouring off him. I should have stopped her sooner. I should have defended you. How did I let it get this far? Emotion thickened my throat. This wasn't about blame. This wasn't about last night. This was about everything building quietly for months. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Sweetheart, people only show you who they are when they think no one's watching. He swallowed hard, and then in the quietest voice I'd ever heard from him, he said, Mom, I think she slapped you because she's scared. I think she knows you're the only person who can threaten what she's building. My breath froze. He didn't know the truth yet. He didn't know how right he was. He didn't know that the trust she bragged about, the trust she flaunted in front of everyone, the trust she believed made her untouchable, had a condition written into it that she had already broken. And if Lily had slapped me with even a fraction of understanding, she would have realized she'd slapped her entire future across the face. But Matthew didn't know that, not yet. Just as he opened his mouth to ask the question I'd prayed he wouldn't ask, there was a loud, sharp, frantic banging on my front door. We both froze, the kind of knock that comes from someone whose world is falling apart. Matthew stood slowly. Mom, do you think? I already knew. I felt it in my bones because something had happened, something big, something she could no longer control. I stood up, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Because whoever was behind that door was bringing the moment Lily had been terrified of since the second she slapped me. And when we opened it, you won't believe who was standing there. The door swung open, and there she was, Lily, barefaced, hair a mess, dress from last night still wrinkled and stained from where champagne splashed during the commotion. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked terrified, not angry. Not smug, not superior, just terrified. Her voice cracked the moment she saw Matthew beside me. We need to talk, now." Matthew stepped back, placing his body slightly in front of mine without even thinking, a silent apology for everything he didn't see sooner. His voice was cold, unfamiliar. "What do you want, Lily?" She flinched like he'd slapped her. Can we go inside? Please, someone might see me." That sentence told me everything, because Lily didn't come here out of remorse. She came here out of fear. I stepped aside wordlessly. She rushed in, pacing like a trapped animal. Her hands shook, her breathing was uneven. And then she said it, "My account, my trust, something's wrong." She turned toward us slowly, mascara smudged under her eyes. I woke up and things were missing, frozen, flagged. I don't understand what's happening. My spine tingled, because this moment right here was the beginning of everything she never expected. Matthew frowned, confused. "What do you mean frozen? Frozen how?" She swallowed hard, choking on the panic rising in her chest. "My trustee said there's an issue, a compliance violation, something about conduct, about terms." About her eyes landed on me, then widened, then trembled. It mentions you, Marianne." Matthew's head snapped toward me so fast I thought he'd hurt himself. "Mom, what's she talking about?" My heart thudded painfully. This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for, but before I could speak, Lily rushed forward. "You have to fix it. You have to tell them everything's fine between us. That last night didn't mean anything, please." "Please, Marianne," she reached for my arm. Matthew stepped between us instantly, voice sharp as glass. "Don't touch her." Lily froze, the same way she froze last night when she realized the room wasn't laughing with her. She looked at me again, not with arrogance, but with desperation. "I can lose everything," she whispered. And there it was, the truth she'd spent months hiding under perfect hair, perfect dresses, perfect lies. This wasn't about love or regret or family, it was about her future, her money, her image. And she finally understood that the slap she'd given me wasn't just cruel, it was expensive. Very, very expensive. She sank onto my couch, buried her face in her hands, and whispered the first honest words I'd ever heard from her. "I didn't think it would matter." Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. Matthew stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. Lily looked at me like I was the only lifeline left in her sinking world. And then my phone buzzed on the table. A name lit up the screen. A name Lily did not want to see calling me. I picked up the phone slowly because this was the moment her serious trouble officially began. The moment I answered the phone, Lily's head snapped up like a frightened deer. She recognized the name on my screen, and her whole face drained of color. "Marianne," the voice said, calm, professional, and absolutely the last voice Lily wanted me speaking to. "Good morning," I replied softly. My tone made Lily flinch. Matthew watched both of us, confusion growing by the second. The voice continued. "I'm calling with an update regarding the incident you reported last night. We've reviewed the documentation you submitted." Lily pressed both hands over her mouth. She knew exactly what documentation they were referring to. My cheeks still felt warm at the memory. The caller continued, each word deliberate. "There are significant concerns about conduct that may affect the beneficiary's standing. We'll need to proceed with the next steps unless you advise otherwise." Lily shot up from the couch. "No, no, please don't," she whispered, shaking. I turned away slightly, giving myself a moment, because hearing her fall apart wasn't satisfying, it was overwhelming. This wasn't triumph. Not yet. This was the turning of a tide she'd never imagined would shift against her. I spoke slowly, carefully. "I understand. Thank you for updating me. I'll review everything and contact you shortly." When I ended the call, the room felt electric, silent, tense, ready to break. Matthew stepped closer. "Mom, what was that?" But Lily didn't give me the chance to answer. She collapsed to her knees, right in front of us. "Marianne, please," she cried, voice raw. "They said my trust might be suspended. They mentioned behavior, conduct. Public incidents." Tears streamed down her face, mascara carving black lines down her cheeks. "They said the board wants a statement from you since you were the one her voice cracked. She couldn't even say the word slapped. Matthew's eyes widened, and something in him broke, loudly, visibly. "Lily," he whispered, "you hit my mother. Why?" She shook her head, sobbing. I don't know. I was stressed. People were watching, and she stepped in the frame and what?" Matthew snapped. "That made you think it was okay to humiliate her." In front of almost 300 people, her sobs grew louder but not softer. They were the panicked sobs of someone who finally realized the consequences weren't just social embarrassment. They were financial, life-changing. And she wasn't prepared. She grabbed the hem of my sleeve. Please, please help me. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. Just tell them it wasn't abuse. Tell them it wasn't malicious. My voice came out low, steady, filled with months of quiet pain she never noticed. Lily, you didn't just slap me. Her eyes lifted slowly. You showed everyone exactly who you are. The words hung in the air like a trembling wire about to snap. Matthew watched me with a mixture of shock and realization, the beginning of a truth he'd avoided for far too long. Outside, the sun was rising, morning had come, and with it, the unraveling she never saw coming. The sun had barely cleared the tops of the houses when the second call came. This time, it wasn't a gentle update, it was a summons. Lily froze when she heard the ringtone, a sound so sharp in the quiet kitchen it felt like the whole room inhaled. I didn't rush to answer. I just stared at the screen long enough for her to understand this wasn't going away. Matthew watched her crumble in silence, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. He wasn't defending her anymore. He wasn't even trying to. When I finally pressed accept, the voice was crisp, cold, official. Good morning, Mrs. Caldwell. We're calling because the board has requested a formal review regarding the behavioral incident filed last night. Lily's breath hitched like someone had punched the air out of her. A review, that word was enough to shake every piece of her carefully crafted life. The trust, the image, the prestige, the money, all built on the illusion of poise and perfect behavior. The voice continued. We'll need your cooperation and will also require a written account from you within 24 hours. Lily covered her face with both hands, sobbing into her palms. 24 hours. Less time than she'd ever given me to fix her messes. Less time than she'd allowed me to stay in my place. When I ended the call, the silence was heavier than anything I'd felt at that engagement party. Lily slowly lowered her hands, eyes swollen, voice trembling as she whispered, Marianne, if that review goes through, if they report me to the board, I could lose everything. Her voice cracked again. I didn't mean to hit you. I swear I didn't. It just happened and I was embarrassed and what? I said gently. She swallowed hard and I took it out on you. There it was, not an apology, just the truth, finally slipping out because her empire was slipping with it. Matthew stepped forward, voice quiet but steady. Lily, you didn't take something out. You slapped my mother in public and then you laughed. Her lips trembled. I know, and I hate myself for it. I wasn't thinking, but she was thinking. She'd thought I was powerless, disposable, easy to silence, easy to blame. She never imagined I had a voice that mattered in places she'd only benefited from. She never imagined I held the kind of connection she thought she controlled. A soft knock sounded at the door. Matthew frowned and went to answer it. When he opened it, he froze. On the doorstep stood a courier holding a sealed envelope, thick, embossed, unmistakably official. For Miss Lily Harper, he said. Lily's knees buckled. She didn't even open it. She didn't need to. She already knew. The morning wasn't just dangerous for her future. It was arriving at her door, wrapped in formal paper. And inside that envelope was the beginning of a process she couldn't charm, scream, or slap her way out of. What came next was going to change everything. The envelope sat on the table like a ticking clock. No one touched it. No one breathed too loudly. Even the morning light seemed afraid to land on it. Lily finally reached for it with trembling fingers, but stopped halfway, as if simply holding it might snap the last thread holding her world together. Do you want me to open it? Matthew asked softly. She shook her head. No, I need to do it. Her voice cracked on the word need, because for the first time in her life, she couldn't run, couldn't charm, couldn't twist the narrative. She had to face what she'd done. She slid her thumb under the seal, a slow, shaky breath, and then she opened it. Her eyes scanned the first line, then the second, and suddenly her whole face drained of color. She clutched the paper with both hands like it might fly away if she loosened her grip. Matthew stepped closer. What does it say? She didn't answer, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't speak. I gently placed a hand on the table beside her. Lily, what is it? She finally looked up, and the fear in her eyes was something I had never seen before. They've frozen everything, she whispered. The trust, my accounts. My board privileges, all of it. A tiny, broken laugh escaped her. They want a full behavioral review. They're contacting the trustees. They're pulling security footage from the engagement party. Footage of the slap, of her yelling at me. Of the humiliation she tried to bury under her perfect smile. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, as if holding in a scream. I didn't think one mistake could destroy everything. I looked at her gently. It wasn't one mistake, Lily. Silence heavy, true. She blinked, the words hitting harder than any punishment the trustees could deliver. Matthew exhaled, voice quiet but painfully honest. You've been hurting people for years. You think it started last night. That was just the first time you did it in front of an audience. Lily folded the letter and placed it on the table with shaking hands. She finally looked at me, not with fire, not with entitlement, but with something closer to recognition or defeat. I'm so sorry, Marianne. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't manipulative. It was raw, real. The apology I should have heard years ago. I nodded, not forgiving, not forgetting, just acknowledging the moment, because sometimes the most powerful consequence isn't revenge. It's truth arriving at the exact moment someone can no longer run from it. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Then Matthew spoke, barely above a whisper. We'll figure out what happens next, but you have to take responsibility, Lily. All of it, she nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. And as I looked at her, the same young woman who slapped me in front of 287 witnesses, I realized something. This wasn't the end of her life. Just the end of the version she built on arrogance, entitlement, and cruelty. Tomorrow she would face the trustees. Tomorrow her actions would be reviewed. Tomorrow her future would be rewritten. But tonight, the house was still. The truth was undeniable, and for the first time ever, Lily understood exactly what it meant to know her place. Not beneath anyone, not above anyone, just equal, human, responsible. The morning had arrived, and with it, the consequences she never imagined would come. And that was the real beginning of change.